Hey everybody, welcome to Performance Anxiety, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark. Before we jump into the show, I wanted to take a second and thank AKG for sending us their Podcaster Essentials package. If you ever thought about starting your own podcast, this is an economical and high-quality way to get started. It includes the AKG Lyra USB microphone and the K371 set of headphones, which are amazingly comfortable. Highly recommend it. Now, we're joined by a musician who thrives when he's uncomfortable. Tobias Nathaniel's greatest enemy is muscle memory. That's why he switched from guitar to organ. He formed the Blackheart Procession and kept his penchant for being uncomfortable by playing instruments like sheet metal and being the wedding band for Melvin's drummer Dale Crover's nuptials. He also explained how he inadvertently wrote Rick and Morty's Evil Morty theme. Toby moved to Serbia to show solidarity with vampires and possibly join a vampire class action lawsuit. He also tells us how Madonna broke his heart. He started a new band called The Red Step that sounds like garage rock meets post-punk. It's raw and gloomy in the best ways. He also discusses his performance anxiety and how he became a frontman for his band. Follow The Red Step on social media and pick up their debut on Pravda Records. Follow us at Performance ANX. Subscribe, rate, and review, especially if you're in Serbia. Buy us a non-committal cup of coffee at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. Merch featuring our logo, designed by Mark Dancy, creator of Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger logo, is available at performanceanx.threadless.com. Now let's march right into Tobias Nathaniel and The Red Step on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
This is Toby, aka Tobias Nathaniel of The Red Step and the Blackheart Procession. You're listening to Performance Anxiety. That seemed fine with me. All right. Sorry for being difficult right out the gate.
No. This is easy.
Okay, great.
You were there when I called, so that's a good start.
Right.
That doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I had the inverse happen last night.
Oh, really?
I was supposed to do a podcast, and the interviewer was actually sick.
Oh, jeez.
Hopefully not with the obvious.
Yeah, but, hopefully.
So it had to be rescheduled. So yeah, it can happen the other way around too.
I hate that, having to call somebody like, hey, I know we're supposed to talk tonight or tomorrow, whatever it was, but something came up and I got to reschedule. I absolutely hate doing that.
Yeah. I mean, although life is life, and sometimes these things happen.
Exactly. And just about everybody I've had on, if I've ever had to do that, which has only been a few times, they've been very understanding. So.
Good.
I've been really fortunate with this podcast. So.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, so thank you for joining me today. This is you're the first person from Serbia that I've ever had on. So that's
really,
yeah. I don't know exactly how big the music community is in Serbia, but you are definitely the first one I've had so far. So.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. Have we started recording?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we just kind of roll into it a little bit. It's more conversational than anything.
Sure.
So the first thing I like to find out from people I have on is how you got into music in the first place. Was it something that you were doing as a kid? Were you listening to a lot of music? Was there a lot of music in the household growing up?
Yeah, so for me, it kind of started pretty early on with, I must have been around 5 or something, and we had an 8-track tape player, if you remember that.
Wow, yes.
8-track tapes. So I would sit there with headphones on and listen to primarily Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, and Yes, actually.
Oh, nice. Man, that must have been on an 8-track. That must have sucked, because on the longer tracks, didn't you have to flip over to a different side of the 8-track in the middle of a song sometimes?
I don't remember. It would be funny to see that's track down and existing 8-track player and cassette.
Yeah, if I could find like an 8-track copy of Relayer, that'd be a good test right there.
Totally. Yeah, but I don't recall there being some kind of break in the music. Or could have been.
Yeah. So, did you start on guitar originally?
Yeah, so let's see, it's kind of weird. My parents bought me, I'm left-handed, so my parents bought me a left-handed ukulele
Oh, wow. I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, I guess there are.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I kind of goofed around with that for a bit. And then later I had the like Sears special little junky electric guitar with amp. I don't even know. Do people even know what Sears is anymore?
I don't know, because I know all the ones around here. I'm in Winchester, Virginia, and all the ones around here are closed. I think they're in bankruptcy now, aren't they? I think they close everything at this point.
Well, I haven't seen one for a while, so that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah,
Walmart.
There you go. The equivalent, the modern day equivalent.
Right. So yeah, this is a guitar and amp combo thing, little cheapy sort of setup, and I don't know. I played around with that for a bit and kind of lost interest, and then later, this was, well, I think I was like 14. I heard Master of Puppets on vinyl for the first time, and that was like completely eye-opening. It was like I had never heard music before.
Wow. And
actually, previously, I never really understood the music my friends listened to. I would hear it, and I would go along with it because I guess I was supposed to like it.
Really?
We're having fun doing stuff and, skateboarding, whatever. I'm like, okay. But yeah, hearing that album sort of really opened my eyes to what was possible.
What were they listening to that you weren't really getting into?
Oh, just the usual fare, like, mainstream radio or even local radio stuff. Yeah. It just, it didn't, I don't know, it just didn't really connect somehow. Up until that moment, that was the defining moment of like, oh, music can be this. Like, it can actually affect me.
Is that when you decided you wanted to start playing in a band?
It was when I picked up guitar again. Okay. And so I got something a little more decent and right-handed this time. And yeah, so I kind of launched into this path of thrash metal, which was my kind of first real like kind of musical love. Okay.
So when did you actually start playing out? I know I saw some of your first releases were with the band Struggle. Was that
right?
Was that one of your first bands, or was that a couple bands down the line?
Yeah. So the story with that band, that was when I would have been about 17.
Okay.
When that album came out, or maybe 18. How I met them is the drummer for that band was in my jazz band at school. Oh yeah, so basically having done thrash for a bit, I started getting into jazz. In my high school at the time, amazingly, all the cuts in the curriculum with art and everything, they had a really good jazz program. Oh. So I started learning jazz guitar, and the requirement to be in the band was that you had to study jazz theory and take lessons from some pretty serious people. Okay. So I started developing technique and theory. And so anyway, the drummer of Struggle was the drummer for our high school jazz band. And
nice.
Their guitarist, Cliff, I remember at the time, had to leave the band due to like college stuff. He was going off to college. So I replaced him and infused it with a little more metal. They're like, too metal. Oh, yeah, perfect. Back, it's perfect, like crossover metal, hardcore stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first thing that I was on that was published. And so we did, little West Coast tour or something. And,
cool.
And, so that band, and incidentally, the bassist of that group is Justin Pearson, who's in The Locust and most recently Dead Cross.
Oh, cool. That's pretty awesome.
So San Diego has a really interesting music scene.
Yeah. So this was in California. You grew up in California?
Yeah. I've only been in Serbia for a little over 5 years.
Right.
And I've lived, I was born and raised in San Diego, and I moved to Portland, Oregon when I was like around 30 or so.
Okay. And you went from Struggle and into the band 3 Mile Pilot. Was that the next band, or did you have anything in between that kind of made that transition a little easier for you?
Yeah. vastly different bands.
You did. They really are.
Yeah, so yes, some things did happen in between. I had a band with some friends called the Young Destroyers, which was like a garage rocky, kind of spooky garage rock thing where I played organ. And I kind of made this decision to play organ because every time I sat down at the guitar, my fingers just started moving in the patterns that they were supposed to move in.
Oh, yeah.
And so I wasn't making this connection anymore with my heart or mind.
Okay.
I figured it'd be cool to sort of shed the theory a little bit and technique and sit down at something and only just use, my ear.
Wow.
So I started playing, we had a little Hammond organ. So started playing that.
That's awesome.
Kind of rocky thing with my good friend, Josh Kwan. And then kind of simultaneously, Josh and I were in another band that he had started called A Day Called Zero, in which I played bass. Trying to step away from the guitar a little bit and experiment with other instruments and just other ways of doing things, and trying to look at music as a whole rather than just I'm a guitarist, and like to remove that identity and kind of look at music differently. So those two bands happened, and how I ended up joining Three Mile Pilot was they had already existed for a long time.
Okay.
They're a popular band in San Diego and had just been signed to Geffen Records. They had finished an album and were looking for, they're always a 3-piece, but they were looking for someone to do like additional parts, to play the parts they had written that were like organ and, some the bass and even drums on stuff. So as an instrumentalist, like I kind of fit. And the San Diego scene back then was interesting. It was a little bit fragmented, maybe like, we had a scene, but there were sort of sub-scenes that were a little bit divided, and there was a bit of crossover, but people kind of tended to stay in there.
Oh, really?
So I was, they were from a different scene. They were a little bit older. And at any rate, I met those guys and Paul, who's also the singer of Blackheart Procession, singer of Three Mile Pilot. So, I tried out with them, and it all worked out, and we got along. And
stuck by this river, you and I, underneath the sky that's ever falling down, ever falling down.
When you start playing organ, you're just going by feel. You're not taking any lessons. You haven't taken piano lessons or anything like that. You're just trying to jumpstart your creativity by doing it on your own.
Yes. And in fact, I really like for things to be uncomfortable for me on piano. I still, even though I'm sort of considered to be a pianist,
right,
primarily, it's never comfortable for me.
Wow.
Especially if once I get a handle on the song itself, it becomes easier, but I never wanted to feel cozy. I want to sit down, feels a little bit like, it's not necessarily fighting me, but I don't want to feel so comfortable that my fingers do the talking rather than something else. Right.
Yeah. You don't want to get stagnant and just go to the muscle memory chords and
Exactly.
Okay. And you end up leaving 3 Mile Pilot. Now, did you leave with Paul at the same time and start Blackheart Procession?
Yeah, so how that went down was Geffen wasn't happy with the album. So I had already been playing with them for a bit, learning their parts and so on. But Geffen wasn't happy with the album. They felt there wasn't a strong single, as major labels like to do.
Right.
And so the A&R guy's like, hey, look, you got this new dude. Maybe he can, you guys can work on some more material with that guy involved. And so we kind of started working on stuff. And actually, this is a bit of a diversion, but it's kind of a funny story.
I love funny stories. That's what this whole podcast is about.
I saw, and I'm really bad at remembering this stuff, but I sat down and tried to remember some goofy stuff. So I remember talking to our A&R guy at the time at Geffen, and I think Madonna had just come out with some song, it's like Frozen. song.
Okay.
And we were talking about something. I'm like, well, it's like fine, but at least she's writing her, she writes her music and blah blah blah. And the A&R guy's like blank stare, like she doesn't write her own music. It just blew my mind. I had no idea. I didn't understand like the mechanisms of the major label industry, how all that stuff works. Because I'd only dealt with like kind of independent bands who, wrote their own music,
right.
In whatever capacity, whether it's, more of a collective thing or someone brings the ideas. So that was a huge, like, shock to me.
Oh,
like,
wow.
I'm like, are you kidding? Like, this music is all so bad and they're not even writing it.
Yeah. She's not even writing it herself. It's horrible. And she's choosing to sing it.
Sure. So anyway, that was a kind of funny story that reminded me of. At any rate, back to the previous stuff.
Right.
So the label ultimately decided not to release the record. Unfortunately, they didn't shelve it. They gave it back to us.
Oh, wow.
And it was ultimately released with a few new tracks with me on them through Cargo Records in San Diego. And at the time, so what basically happened with Black Art is we were kind of under the thumb of this, like, major label machine expectations that they had, like they like to do. This band is awesome. Let's get a hold of it and change the shit out of it.
Yes,
so it sucks.
Exactly.
So I think we were all pretty like frustrated with that situation. And Paul and I were living together at the time, and we decided, like, look, let's do some stuff where there's no restrictions, and let's be as weird and creative, do what we want, and not even tell each other no to our ideas. And so that's and at the same time we had just broken up with our girlfriends, and so we were all gross and depressed. So we decided to do this thing and kind of make fun of this sadness.
Okay.
Do it in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way.
Oh,
I think people think that we're really super fucking morose, but we're really not. And especially when you deal with so often, what's the right word, like interacting with these kind of feelings and considering them and then expressing them, it's cathartic. And, a lot of people keep those things bottled up inside. And, I think that can alter their, mood and behavior.
Oh, for sure. So you guys were basically approaching the music in an improv type of way where it's yes and. So somebody brings in an idea and you're like, yes, and we'll do this.
Sure. It was, of course, with some minor tweaks, and those minor tweaks became larger tweaks later. But the idea was, let's just, do something, have fun, do something creative, and really try to allow each other the space to do the things that we want to do.
Okay.
And for the most part it did. And one thing that I did learn from the major label experience was songwriting in terms of song structure and arrangement. Okay. One of these previous bands I was in, we had, these 10, 15-minute songs.
Yeah.
And that experience, whether it was direct or indirect, kind of taught me that, the song should just say what it means. Like, it doesn't need to go on for 10 minutes if there's a couple, And then some people actually have 3 songs and they don't realize it, and they turn it into one song.
Ah, okay. I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that was valuable, however it occurred. But that's kind of when it occurred, and it sort of changed my approach toward songwriting and song structure.
And you're playing piano in Black Art Procession, but I also noticed that you also play sheet metal.
So the way Black Art works, I would be the multi-instrumentalist, but primarily piano.
Right.
Which is what I mostly play live. But when we do the recordings, it's pretty much whatever.
Oh, man.
So on some songs, like, I might play drums and piano and organ and bass, even some guitar. Paul will do, who's a singer, plays guitar, but we also experiment and let each other experiment. And he plays the musical saw. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I love musical songs.
Yeah, it's great spooky theremin.
Exactly, the creepy sci-fi sound.
Exactly.
The name Blackheart Procession, is that based on the breakup of the girlfriends and the dealing with those feelings?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like representative of the mood. And again, this thing is kind of tongue in cheek, and I don't think people always, because it is pretty dark. But if you listen to lyrics, for example, Paul will put things like heart in every title of the song on the first album.
Right.
There's like little markers, little roadmaps there if you want to see it. It's like overtly, deliberately, oh so sorry me.
Right.
I lost track. You were asking.
Oh man!
The name.
Yeah. I forgot too. I was just enjoying the stories.
Great. I was worried I'd be too boring or not have enough to say.
Oh God, no.
Yeah. So the name actually is another, it's representative of the kind of collaborative thing between Paul and I. He came up actually with the Blackheart part, and I came up with the Procession part.
Oh, cool.
And it just sort of, he's like, Blackheart something, like a group of people moving, blah, blah, blah. And then like a funeral procession. So it all works.
Something people moving. That's awesome. You mean a procession? Yes.
People moving in a somber and
you guys, you put out several albums, you toured, and you're still based in the San Diego area at that point?
Let's...
Or the Portland?
Then. Yeah, so what happened is I think we had already released 4 by the time I moved to Portland.
Okay.
So I think that was 2004. I'm bad at numbers and dates. But yeah, so then we made the decision to move, and for the first 3 albums we recorded at a studio, and we spent our advances on the recording studio. And for the 4th album, we decided to actually build our own studio.
Oh, cool.
And so the album previous was all done in San Diego. So we had the resources now to kind of do things on our own terms, and also have more people play, because we had been recording in Seattle, actually Bothell, at a studio called Bear Creek.
Oh yeah.
It's an amazing people. So, but that ate our whole budget, and it was really hard to get additional people to play with us. So Paul and I did most of the stuff, and would maybe invite a drummer or a trumpet player or something, or someone who could do both or more.
Okay.
So starting the studio, and this was mostly kind of Paul's thing. He wanted to also do the studio for his own purposes, like he wanted to record and produce and do stuff. I was never interested so much in because people tend to nerd out on the gear, and they lose track of the, here's this great compressor, and here's this and that. And it's well, yes. Cool. I'm just trying to use my ears.
You're more feel and whatever it takes to get what's in your head.
It's super, super important. And even these days, to take another diversion, I won't touch an instrument until an idea is pretty developed.
Oh, really? Wow.
So I have this fear of the fingers ruining something.
Okay.
And so if a song, for instance, right now I've got 2.5 of them in my head. And so, but they've been there for a while, okay. And they intend to stay, but a few have come and gone, and I guess they, didn't make the cut or whatever. Yeah. But I think something is strong enough and it stays there long enough. And if I know what it's supposed to sound like, I won't make a mistake. So
you don't really like to do a lot of experimenting before you start playing the songs then?
That can work.
Okay.
For me these days, no, not so much. Again, in the early days of piano, since it was such a new instrument, it was such a new thing for me. Everything felt new.
Yeah. And
certain combinations of notes or chords or something would kind of ooh, this is new,
Yeah.
The shapes that my fingers are making here make that sound. So yeah, but as I've, developed as a writer, and especially in the current situation with Red Step and stuff, I kind of tend to like ideas to be fairly developed in terms of primary melody, vocal melody, chord structure, chord changes, and some element of harmony.
Okay.
And an idea. It's kind of it's like, I'm sure everyone has had songs stuck in their head. You have some Rolling Stones song. Yeah. It's you just can't remember it. It's there. And it feels real. That's what these things are like for me. So it's like having a song stuck in your head, but it doesn't exist yet.
Oh, wow. So now, are you actually hearing the completed song, or is it just little fragments that you're trying to mentally tuck away to hopefully pull back at another point?
Yeah, it depends. So,
Okay.
Because there are always, there are other band members and they will have contributions in some way or another. Sometimes if a thing is strong enough, like if there's like an organ line, I'll be like, this was really important as a counter melody or harmony. It works directly with the vocal melody. But I like to leave some space for people to, compose a part that works within the context.
Oh, cool. So when did you hook up with Blonde Redhead?
Blonde Redhead. So we were at the time, Blackheart and Blonde Redhead, on the same label. And this would have been around Blackheart's third album.
Okay.
We actually introduced them to Bear Creek. They
cool.
recorded them many times. But so we, being on the same label, we did some touring together and, got kind of close, got to know each other. And then they asked me if I would fly up to Bear Creek to play piano on a handful of songs on their album Melody of Certain Damaged Lemons, I believe.
Maybe again he will be alone, 'cause we equally
I was like Blonde Redhead, but and honestly, sometimes I don't exactly pay attention to who's on what track. I love reading liner notes and all, but as I've started doing this podcast more, my kids grow up and get older, it's harder for me to actually just sit down and listen to stuff all the way through and read liner notes like I used to. And so I don't always know who's playing on what track. And when I started researching for this episode, I was like, oh man, this is awesome stuff. So,
Great. Yeah, that's great.
So
great
now,
band.
were you just in the studio with them, or did you end up playing live with them at all? Or
I never played live, but yeah, what happened is they sent me a cassette tape. This is all about tapes.
Yeah.
They sent me a cassette tape with these handful of songs they had me in mind for. And they were basic chord changes with maybe some kind of sung melody. So kind of rudimentary.
Okay.
Yeah, chord structure, chord changes, and a melody. So I then, sat down and wrote piano parts for those things. And then I flew up to Bear Creek to record with them. And incidentally, one of those songs, basically once they were recorded, they decided, okay, well, actually the piano is really strong on these. Let's make it the primary instrument.
Okay.
Along with vocals. And one of those ended up being, do you know the show Rick and Morty?
Yes.
All right. So it's For the Damaged Coda. It's piano, vocals, drums, a little bit of guitar. That is the Evil Morty theme.
I was going to ask you about that. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen? Did they reach out and say, hey, we love this part, we want to use it? Or did they just use it and you found out later?
I don't know. I haven't been in touch with the Blonde Redhead people for a while.
Wow.
So I imagine that some music supervisor, working with Rick and Morty, contacted either the label or their management or something.
Oh, so how did you find? Did you just watching Rick and Morty and all of a sudden you're like, hey, there's my piece?
Well, someone told me. Yeah. No, here's how I found it. Well, I think maybe someone told me, and so I looked up this Evil Morty thing, and I was bombarded by piano tutorials.
I did that same thing. As soon as I heard that that was you, I did this exact same thing. It took me a while to find the actual piece. Right.
I think the actual one is just a still image of the album cover.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
But it's crazy how viral that thing went. It's really funny.
So somebody just told you had no idea. That's insane.
I have no idea. Yes.
Oh my gosh. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. So Blackheart Procession, is it on hiatus since with the last album? Because the last album came out in 2009? But you guys have played since then?
Yeah, so we sort of after the record 6, we sort of went back to the basics of Paul and I. We had a couple people play on things like strings and things that we can't do, and a couple guest players that we wanted. Yeah. But we really wanted to go back. We had sort of allowed a more collective approach on the previous record, and we decided to kind of go back to, okay, let's just have it basically be us and invite some friends here and there.
I've got so much to say to you, devotion, obsession. I've got so much to say to you, devotion, obsession. Rip out my guts, devotion, obsession. Rip out my guts. I could whisper.
And so we did all the touring on that, finished that record, did the touring on that. And then, we just decided to kind of take a break after that one. Like things were just, I don't know, all this touring and shit is like not as easy as people think. And also the expectations that you have even from your fans to produce something not only that sounds like you, but is also new and different. Right.
I hear that a lot. You're almost damned if you do, damned if you don't, because you put out something that sounds like you. Oh, that just sounds like everything else. You put out something different. That doesn't sound like them at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So we kind of got to this point where we were like, all right, let's take a little break. And that's what happened. And in the meantime, I had already moved here and started the Red Step. And during that period, our European booking agent called and said, like, there's demand for you guys. Would you be interested in doing a tour? Even though you don't have any new material, people are doing these like play a record from start to finish kind of thing. Yeah. Pick an album that you've done and do it. Wow. And so we agreed to do it. And so we did that. And then we did another US tour. And then we do one-off shows here and there. Like, for example, if I go to San Diego to visit, we'll play a show. I mean, back before the fun times of Corona. Yeah. Good grief. But, so we would kind of, set something up, when we're together and just play here and there. Okay. And we both, yeah. And it's not really, we're not broken up or on hiatus. It's just kind of, we'll do stuff if it works. Yeah. And we've talked about making a new record, and the distance is rough, and right now is rough. But I would love to make another record at this point with Paul to see like how it turns out. Oh, that would be great news. But when did you actually move to Serbia, and why did you choose Serbia? Vampires. Oh, excellent. You know what? That is the best answer for any question I ask anybody. If every podcast the answer was vampires for every question, I would still do this show. Well, I mean, here's the deal. So Serbia is the birthplace of the original vampire, Sava Sabanovic. Okay. And I got kind of tired of hearing all this, Transylvania this and Vlad the Impaler that. Right. And I wanted to kind of move here to, sort of show solidarity in my support of vampires. Interesting. That is the. I'm totally kidding. My wife is my wife is from Belgrade. Damn it! That was such a great. I was going to say that's the most interesting reason anybody else has moved halfway across the world. Yeah. It would have been. I don't know. My solidarity with the vampires. Oh, you got me. All right. Well, that was good. So it's true. That's actually all true. Not me moving here because of it, but the origin of the vampire is actually from Serbia. And in fact, some fun fact is that the name vampire is the only internationally used original Serbian word. Oh, vampire. Wow. That's cool. I didn't realize that. Yeah, weird stuff. So what is the musical scene pre and mid COVID in Serbia? What's it like? Because you've been there since what year did you move there? Over 5 now. Wow. Again, really exact dates. So musical scene here. Well, there are a handful of bands doing different stuff, this and that. I don't know. I wouldn't call it necessarily strong in terms of independent stuff. Okay. There are some mainstream things. We have here what's called Narodnjaci. I know it sounds like neo-Nazi, but it's Narodnjaci. It's like the music. And so it's like, because because Serbia was under the Ottoman Empire for so long, it has this like Turkish, like Orientally vibe stuff, and it's usually played at what we have here called kafana. It's like where a restaurant where people go and they play that kind of music there. And so now they have this version. Some of the original stuff is cool, like the more folky versions, but they have this kind called turbo folk, which is like got a kind of, it's got this kind of electronic bent to it, and it's, I don't know, not my thing.
I'll have to check that out. I gotta hear what that sounds like.
Yeah, turbo folk. Contradiction in terms, right?
Maybe that'll be a YouTube topic, like Blackheart Procession or turbo folk. I have to look that up.
Turbo folks.
So,
but there's stuff here for sure, but I think that it's different here, and it's like I know a lot of bands. My friend Urosh and the guy who also does live sound for Blackheart and Red Step and was the actual recorded and co-produced with me the Red Step album. Mm-hmm. He had a great band. It was called Threesome, and they were kind of like surfy.
Oh, cool.
Surfy. Without lyrics, and I think they found a label actually in the States. It's weird here, and I think that for anything to kind of break beyond the borders, it would have to internationalize and have English kind of as a language, right, as the primary. But I mean, there's definitely a scene here, but it could be stronger in terms of the alternative indie stuff.
So right now it's turbo folk and Serbian surf.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there are definitely people doing creative stuff here for sure. There's some great people doing great music.
So how did you meet everybody that became the Red Step, and how did you choose the name? Was there a significance to the name? Because it sounds like there is.
Yeah, so interesting. The drummer is my brother-in-law.
Okay.
And the bassist is my kum. This is a specific Serbian thing. It's like best man and godfather of your child combined.
Oh, wow. Type of deal. Okay.
So he was at our wedding as a best man, and so has this title. And I met these guys through my wife, and I actually went and saw their previous band, Kazna Zaushi, play. And I'm like, oh, these guys are actually great players. Like,
cool.
And the keyboardist was also, so I like inadvertently kind of stole the band from the singer of the Kazna Zaushi. I feel bad, but a little bit. So that's how we all met, and they're like, we know you're some musician guy. You should, we should jam, whatever. And I'm not at all into jamming, but I was like, well, okay, I have a handful of ideas. Like, let's get together and play. And so we kind of started doing that and playing, and it just developed from there. Another interesting thing is that this is the first time that I've been in a project where I am kind of the front person singer, guitar player.
Yes.
So that was an interesting thing. Like I had never considered myself a singer. I just didn't really think about it that way. And a friend of ours, this guy, Nikola Vronkovic from a popular band here called Blockout, he came to our practice and we were talking about it. And I was like, I don't know, man, I really would like to find someone, and especially someone who can sing in English, da-da-da. And he's like, why don't you do it?
Oh.
And I was like, me? It was like ding, and I'm like, well, I don't. He's like, he's like, just go sing right now.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay. And so I sang, and I'm sure it was like fucking awful, but like he's like, keep doing that. In 6 months, you'll be fine.
Wow.
He's like, you'll find your voice. Just do it. And so I had never considered my voice an instrument. I mean, I'm a multi-instrumentalist, and it was weird that I had never considered that to be a role for me. Like,
man, so it was almost like a dare.
Yeah, and he was. Maybe I'm getting him wrong, but he was like, "You do it." Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So that's how that happened, and that was also an interesting experience writing lyrics, because Paul's the primary lyric writer for Blackheart.
Okay.
Or the lyric writer, and my role in terms of that stuff for Blackheart is like we just make sure everything that we all like everything that is there.
Okay.
So kind of like post writing editor or something. So that was also fun, like trying to figure out, I had never really considered writing, words or lyrics. So
wow.
That was also an interesting process.
So you just jumped into that role completely.
Yeah, there was kind of not much else to be done about it, so I did.
No one else is doing it, so.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, interesting, and I'm glad. I have to thank Nikola Vrankovic for that. That push.
When you're working on the music and the songs for the Red Step, do the Serbian members of the band, do they bring like a different view of music, like the turbo folk view, or something that's more native to Serbia as opposed to like American rock music, maybe chord progressions, song arrangements, things like that? Do they have a different point of view to make this song sound a little different?
Well, I originally thought that that's how it might go, but not directly.
Okay.
Like this, there's really nothing like Balkan about the Red Step, except for one song that's not on this album. It's called A Road to Sorrow.
Okay. And
for that one specifically, I wanted a Balkan like female vocalist and violinist. So that one does have it, but mostly no. But if there is any influence, it's sort of indirect from like their perspectives. And of course you amass like, all kinds of different experiences and perspectives.
Right.
So, but not directly, no.
And so what is behind the name The Red Step?
Okay. This is interesting. So of course, the name thing, it's always a battle.
Nowadays, even more so. Yeah.
Ooh, hard to come up with something simple, effective, and
not taken.
Whatever. Exactly. So we were kind of, thinking about it. And my coom, this guy, Rudy, who I mentioned before, the bassist, he said, he was talking about his son, who was just learning to drive and went on his first drive, which would be something like jump in the fire. Like, you're just like, you make it happen, like jump in the pool, do whatever.
Oh my
So
gosh.
he said, he's taking his first, in English, he said he's taking his first red step or something like that.
Okay.
And I was like, but I found out that it was kind of an improper he translated it directly to English. And so it's not exactly right later. But I was like, the red step. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, this is actually great. I found out first that it was available, which was nice. And then I started thinking about it and what the meaning behind it would be. And it actually, with names, it's kind of funny. It's more like, does it not suck? Rather than is it good? Because you can find, like, if you can name something and then realize later, like, oh no, it could be perceived this way. And
okay. I see what you're saying.
So I thought about it for a long time and I couldn't find anything terribly negative about it. Right. And then in terms of the positive things, sort of like, Serbia being part of former Yugoslavia, which was like communism light.
Right.
So like the red step, red for communism, taking a step in that direction. And also because I had moved from the States here. Mm-hmm. So there's one red step. And then it's also like a dance move, a step. Okay. So it like has this idea of dance, like the red step, dance name. And then also it's kind of noirish, like, you think of like someone stepping in some blood and leaving these bloody steps.
That's cool. I didn't think that. Yeah, I mean, man, that does. I could see that in the in a black and white movie. Like I'm blanking on any of the actors' names, but I can see their faces. But it's you use some of that old footage in your videos, like the vaudeville era and some old factory film that I've seen. That's really cool stuff.
Yeah. That's Mariana, my wife. She does all the artwork and design. And so that was our idea was like, let's do something for all the videos. We made our first video and I think it was a little ambitious and didn't turn out quite how we had in mind. But then we were talking about it. Let's do something where there's a theme. It's thematic. So all of them will have some similar aspect. Like, I don't know, you see some bands release things on YouTube where it's like, there's like minimal movement. So it's more a little bit more interesting than staring at an album cover.
Right.
But so there's something happening a little bit and we're like, let's do that, but a little bit more. Okay. So it's not really, the traditional video in that sense, but so pretty much the idea is that all the videos from this point forward will be like that, with this kind of smoky, inky mask that drops down.
Yes.
And some kind of footage, vintage footage of some sort that represents in some way the meaning.
Okay. Well, I loved watching them. They're really cool. Some really excellent old industrial footage. I love that kind of stuff.
Great. I'm glad to hear it.
So you've mentioned
that cool too. It's a little weird though. So I don't know if it's.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like it. But now you've mentioned that the songs that you write are more influenced by reading rather than music. Can you explain maybe how that works?
Yeah, so this kind of ties into what we were talking about before with this like songs in my head thing. Okay. I'll elaborate on that a bit. Yeah. So like there's some people who have huge record collections and they like to, who are musicians, and they have these so they're constantly getting this input, a musical input, and for me, like I couldn't do that. It's too much information, and I would be worried about, am I going to plagiarize something, or it would be too. Okay. It would be such a crazy like process.
Right.
So for me, I really don't listen to a lot of music.
Wow. Okay.
And so what happens in my head, I think, is that there's like an amalgamation of a lot of stuff I've heard before from the past, and it all kind of just melds together into something.
Okay.
So, I mean, there are all kinds of different processes for, writing songs. For me, it's that.
Okay.
And as for my inspiration comes from things that, since I don't listen to music, it comes from so much. It comes from other things like reading or just life experiences, observing
vampires.
Of course, Serbian vampires.
Serbian vampires, the original vampires.
Yeah. No, none of this Transylvanian horseshit.
The bullshit. The posers.
Exactly.
Probably need to bring a lawsuit for the appropriation of Serbian vampires by Transylvania.
Cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need to do something about that. I don't know what I could.
Appropriation.
A vampire lawsuit would be amazing.
That would be, yeah.
That sounds like a good Saturday Night Live skit or something. Back when they were good.
Yeah, totally. Hey, could I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, sure.
How did you, I really dig the name Performance Anxiety for your show. And I was curious, like how that came about. Like, is there a meaning behind it?
There was, but the show's kind of morphed a bit since then. I was trying to think of, I used to do a bunch of sports podcasts. One was a local, I live near Washington, D.C., so one was a local podcast based on the DC sports teams. And when that ended, we kind of branched out with some friends on the West Coast. Me and one of my co-hosts for that, we kind of branched out and did one that was more nationally focused. So, but I was never getting my musical fix. We'd have guests and all, but each of those would have a theme. One was DC sports, and the other was kind of a sports comedy mix. But there's always some, sports was always the running theme through the whole thing. And so I figured I want to do this podcast where I talk to artists and all, but I started trying to think of what's the common theme I could ask about to tie all the shows together. And I was way overthinking it. And I figured I would start asking about if musicians or artists, creative people that I had on the show had any type of performance anxiety, and I would get so into the conversation, I would forget to ask that specifically. So it started off as, hey, how did you get over any fears that you had, whether it's playing in public or fears of branching out into a different type of music, whatever type of anxiety a creative person would have. And I just kept forgetting to ask. And so it's kind of not exactly been a focus of the show, but I started and I got my logo made and everything. So I can't really change it now.
Right. Great. That's awesome.
But
no, that makes sense. Yeah, totally. That's great.
But, the common theme is basically now I just like getting the stories that happen behind the scenes. What happens when you're recording? What's a weird story that happened when you're recording? Or what's the worst experience you've had live? Things like that. So,
right.
Plus, similar to band issues, there's a million, more, millions of podcasts out there, and you got to find one that doesn't have a name. You got to find something with a unique name. So fortunately, that one was not taken. And that's basically how the whole thing came about.
Great. Well, congratulations. It's awesome. I see that you've done 150-ish of these things.
Yes.
Congrats.
Oh, thanks, man.
Cool title or cool name for the show. And I mean, in the spirit of the show, I have a performance anxiety story.
I am ready.
So first of all, I always have it. I have it usually like 15 minutes before the show and at least 10 minutes into the show.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, hey, that kind of goes with your whole not being comfortable playing an instrument.
A little bit, yeah. So there's always that aspect, but it tends to just kind of behave the same way each time.
Okay.
Like, okay, I'm always nervous, and then I'm mortified for 5 or 10 minutes on stage, and then it just becomes a no matter what. It can be for playing to 2 people or playing to 15,000. It's like all the same.
Okay.
So, but the scariest experience that I've ever had was not from didn't come from playing a show, but from playing a wedding.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
so,
wow.
So Paul and I did the music for Dale and Maureen Crover's wedding. Dale Crover.
Oh, yeah.
Melvins and or some Nirvana.
Yes.
We had done some touring with the Melvins and also Maureen was like an old housemate of mine, roommate, and super good friends.
Oh, cool.
So they decided they decided that they wanted us to do the actual music for the ceremony.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't, it was very complicated. There were 5 different pieces or so, if I recall, or at least 4. Wow. Union of the Candle and all the stuff. And there were, so I did something funny, like with the melody for the Here Comes the Bride. Dun, 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 dun. I changed all the chords underneath it so it would sound more like Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, cool.
So it was kind of fun and interesting. But so that wedding was filled with people and bands and not only just bands, but like tons of people who I respected and looked up to. And there were hundreds of them. And I was scared shitless. And after that, it went off okay. But after that, I vowed like no more weddings. Because not only that, but it's like when you play live, and if you make a mistake, you can be like, well, screw it. It's like, it's my band. I made, it's okay. I made a mistake.
Yeah.
But like in a situation like that, you're like directly giving this is for someone else, like directly.
Yeah. And they're going to be recording it.
It's for this purpose. Like, yeah. And so the pressure to make sure you're doing it right for them it can be a bit overwhelming.
Oh yeah. And if it's your friends, you mess something up, it's recorded, and B, you're never going to hear the end of it.
Of course, right.
That's kind of funny because I just saw an article maybe it's a month ago, maybe a little more, story of Iron Maiden crashing a wedding in Poland.
Okay.
I don't know how it happened. I don't remember the story behind it, but they're on tour. I think maybe the tour bus had broken down or something. So they went into this restaurant or bar or something, and it turns out there was a wedding there. So they went up with the wedding band and they just started playing with the wedding band. So,
what did everyone think of that? Were they aware of who it was?
I think the bride or the groom knew who it was, and maybe like a couple of the wedding party. But there's like, grandparents and all in the audience, and I was like, what the hell's going on? Who are these long hair weirdos jumping on stage? Because they actually have a video of it. And it was videotaped because it's the wedding, and
right.
Somebody videotaped it, and it's on YouTube, I believe. And it's hilarious.
That's amazing. That's like either the best or worst thing to happen to you.
Oh, yeah.
Depending.
For me, it would be the best. I love Iron Maiden.
Absolutely. That would rule.
but if it was my brother, he'd be like, what the fuck is going on? This is terrible. So
exactly. Crazy. Great. I'll check it out.
I got a chance to listen to the album, and it's really cool. There's definitely a darkness and an ominous feel to it. It's energetic. It's not like plodding. It's definitely energetic, but it definitely sounds a little dark. And maybe to my ignorance of the area, definitely seems Baltic, because everything that I've ever heard of, like that area of the world, Serbia, Yugoslavia, Bosnia, all that, it seems like a very dark, depressing place, but that might be my Cold War old viewpoint coming in.
Right.
But
that's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but it feels to me like, I don't know, one of my favorite albums back in the 90s was a Sabotage album, when right before Trans-Siberian Orchestra kind of grew out of that. They had an album based upon a story about Sarajevo, and it was all cold and snowy, and it was the album Dead Winter Dead, which I really like. But that's the feel that I always get like a cold, snowy, dark feeling whenever I hear anything about that area of the world. So this album is a little dark and ominous, and kind of fits with my perception of the area.
Yeah, I suppose it does. Yeah, I mean, I suppose having lived here and hearing the music that comes from here, it's not so much. But here's where that may have come from, is that having grown up in San Diego, we have a noticeable lack of seasons. So it's basically always summer there. And part of this Blackheart Procession thing was like longing for winter. Like, I want this winter. The winter will never come. Okay. And so we kind of made that winter happen. And also, I will say for sure, in terms of musical influence, Eastern European classical is one of them.
Okay.
So I kind of come from that that thing. And the Balkan thing is a little bit different, especially Serbia, because of the Ottoman Empire influence. So things sound a bit different, more Asian.
Okay. Now,
Macedonia, their folk music is crazy dark.
Oh, really?
Like, really? Yeah.
I see. I like dark folky stuff. Like, one of my favorite bands of all time is Woven Hand and 16 Horsepower. So
yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that I'm kind of drawn to. Maybe it's the Serbian vampire in me trying to come out. But
fantastic.
Your guitar is so heavy, but without going the obvious, heavy metal distorted tone. It sounds just like it's a subtly overdriven clean channel, very garage rocky sound.
Yeah,
and I love it, especially. I'm trying to think of the song, Through Our Seasons. First of all, the cello on that is absolutely beautiful.
Beautiful melody, yeah.
Yeah, and the guitar tone on that, it sounds a little bit like a Stevie Ray Vaughan type of tone to the guitar, where it's just slightly overdriven. It's just an amazing track. I think Through Our Seasons is my favorite track on the album.
Wow, great. Well, thanks. Yeah, it's definitely, it's more in the Blackheart zone.
Yeah.
Of stuff. And with the Red Step, it was like, with Blackheart, it's like, okay, I've been depressed for 6 albums plus numerous EPs. Yeah. Like, I want to be a little bit pissed off.
Right.
And so, but there's still some leftovers there for sure. There are a few songs that kind of have the more Blackhearty vibe.
Right.
What was I going to say? Guitars. Something about the guitar. Oh yeah. So what's important to me, I have this issue with genre.
Okay.
And people are always like, what genre is it? Or is it A, B, C, D, E, F core thing?
Right.
Grind thing, whatever.
Yeah.
Where it's like, to me, all that matters is genuineness. Like, you're just being on, like, the stuff you're doing is coming from your heart and it's real.
Not like Madonna.
You're not being contrived. Right, exactly. And her silly Frozen song.
Exactly.
Broke my heart, Madonna. In a way, probably, very specific to
that's
me. Not any other people. She probably broke hearts, but not like that.
She was the beginning of the Blackheart Procession.
What's that?
She was the very beginning of the Blackheart Procession.
Absolutely. Yes, she's like the patron saint of Blackheart.
I love that.
Who knew? We don't really tell anyone. We're gonna have to cut that out.
Okay, I'll you know what? I'll just bleep her name out so that nobody knows, and it'll just be in the Blackheart Procession lore. Now, there's somebody that started it all. Who was it?
Excellent.
It was
mysterious.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You're saying that.
No, it's great. I enjoy this as a conversation. The other component that I think is important is taste. So this is where the kind of the genre thing, like, for example, if I put like heavy metal guitars over this stuff, it would just be tasteless, in my opinion, at least to me.
Yes.
So I was looking for this thing where, with the overall design of the sound for the Red Step, I wanted it to be like kind of classic, like instruments that you could have made this in like the 50s or 60s.
Yes.
Like all those instruments existed, and I wanted that kind of tonality. I wanted to go back a little bit to like a classic rock sound and these kind of, these like garagey sounding guitars.
Yeah. Yes.
But then with the cello to add this sophistication a little bit.
Okay.
So you have a classic, garage rocky type thing, post-punky thing, but then there's the cello there, which brings it a little something more, but is still tasteful. That was my idea.
Okay.
Whether it succeeded or not, to keep the genuineness and the honesty of the music and the projection, and then this element of taste.
It works perfectly through our seasons, and Reset is just awesome too, because that song is so heavy to me without using things like distortion and things that would be tasteless. Before the Storm, Temporary Loss, and Through Our Seasons. I think those are my top 4 of the album.
Oh, great. Cool. Yeah, Temporary Loss is a fun one. That one was like a deliberate choice to fuck up the ending.
Oh, really?
Because I could have made it. It could have really easily just been a pretty standard arrangement. Right. And finished, the 3.5 minute something. But I thought, like, when the words were developing, everything was happening with that. I figured, like, okay, this song should just have some noisy build ending that's different.
I love it.
And that song is actually very dark lyrically. I like to keep things indirect. I like myself personally to be able to interpret lyrics. I don't like when they're incredibly direct.
Right.
So, and I love when people argue over like the meaning of Beatles lyrics. It's like, have fun.
Yeah, exactly. They probably don't even know what they mean.
Exactly.
God. They probably barely remember them.
Yeah, they leave it open enough for people to, kind of make the song their own.
Yeah, exactly. Now, do you use a lot of gear? Do you collect gear? Are you concerned about gear? Is that something that you're interested in?
Not one bit.
Okay. So you
No, I'm really. I don't use any pedals live.
Oh, cool.
I have like a Vox AC30, and
oh, nice.
When it's turned up loud enough, it gets that kind of distortion you're talking about.
Yes.
That saturates and breaks up a little bit, and that's all.
That's
awesome.
And
for the longest time, I like the guitar I was using was a sort of Franken guitar that my Rudy, the bassist, had built.
Oh, really?
And it was a combination of like a Music Master neck and some kind of like Jaguar body. It was weird.
Oh, cool.
It is weird, but it was all that was here. I came here with like a backpack and like a tiny suitcase.
Oh, wow. So you just made a clean break then.
Yeah, it was really refreshing to like shed this stuff.
I can imagine. I can't do that. I've got 3 kids and like 3,500 CDs. I'm one of those music collector guys you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, yeah.
But I'm not.
No, it was. Well, I'm in the process of reacquiring a whole bunch of stuff.
I'm also not trying to create music, so
right.
You wouldn't want to hear the music.
But I'm weird. Yeah, I see a lot of people like they're really into pedals, pedal boards, and then in the studio side, outboard gear.
Yeah.
All the different channel strips and all that stuff. And I think it's necessary. I think it's really cool, especially for the studio. Like that stuff needs to be there. And but I don't know, for me, and I don't look at people who use pedals or anything like that. Great, go for it. Yeah. But for me, I like to keep things as simple as possible, and like the root of the tone, like not to overcomplicate. Like, so if I lose 2 pedals and I can't play, like,
Yeah, exactly. Like I've had bands on here that if they've told me that if a pedal goes down, just because of the way the band is set up, then or if a cable goes, it's a patch cable, they're toast. And
right.
It's not a bad thing. It's just the way they get their unique sound. But it kind of they're kind of what's the word? What's the phrase I'm thinking? They're kind of beholden to that gear. Then if that something breaks and they can't find a replacement, like if they're in Serbia and a specific pedal goes down, part of their pedal board, and they can't get it fixed, they're screwed.
Right. So, well, that's a decision that they have to balance.
Exactly. So I've got
a play or not.
I've got another question for you before we start to wrap up, because I thought this was really interesting. How did you end up playing with David J. from Bauhaus?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's see. This was around when I think we had just started making our 4th album, Amor del Tropico, and he had moved to San Diego, like randomly. So again, San Diego, sort of like the spawning ground of the unlikely gothy dark stuff.
Right.
And retirees.
Right.
Just all intermingling, having fun.
Much like Tampa, retirees and death metal.
Right. It's okay, cool. San Diego is sort of, it's a mirror image. Instead it's like, gothy.
Right.
So I never asked him why he ended up moving to San Diego, but so he did, and he started kind of hanging around like the scene, going to shows. He came to some of our shows and we met.
Oh, cool.
And eventually he just asked he asked me if I would play piano on something he was working on, and I said, well, sure. So, and I did. It's actually a super boring story.
Oh. I don't know anything.
I'm sorry. I wish I could.
No, it's the first Bauhaus reference in the show, so it's not. It's awesome.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So anyway, that happened, and then I got to play. We played live like once or twice, and with that project, and I got to play piano on a Bauhaus song with someone from Bauhaus, so I was happy.
That's awesome. That's not boring at all. That is cool as hell.
Yes.
So where can people find the album? It's coming out, and well, by the time this episode comes out, it'll probably be just out. So where can people? Where can people if order it, find it, follow you guys on social media?
Yeah, so we're our social media is easy. It's I need to actually get better at that, but it's at the Red Step Band for everything. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at the Red Step Band.
Excellent.
And in terms of buying the album, it should be available in stores, but I think the best option would be to go to Pravda Records website.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it'll be available there.
Perfect. Well, let's work together and promote the shit out of this episode. I want to have the #1 podcast in Serbia.
I think that's doable.
I'm going to start looking at I'm not. A lot of people doing podcasts are big into the metrics, and I'm this number of downloads and this many streams in this country and that country. I don't know any of that crap. I just like talking to people. So that's what the fun part to me is. So I will check my numbers in Serbia after this episode comes out. So I'm going to be hashtagging.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to be hashtagging
I'll
Serbia.
do my best.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on and telling me some awesome stories. And I'm really enjoying the album. I love the sound of the whole thing. It's just fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on. It was a great discussion. I had a lot of fun.